In February 2022, the world watched in disbelief as Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But as the military advances unfolded on the ground, a parallel war was waged in the shadows of cyberspace and media, a relentless campaign of disinformation.
You know, the war which we are trying to stop and which was launched against us using Ukrainian people.
The strategies employed by Russia to influence thought and policy are as old as the very notion of propaganda itself. Yet, in the modern world, they have evolved into a complex and covert ecosystem of disinformation, digital warfare, and media manipulation. Russia's leadership, particularly under Vladimir Putin, understood that the enemy was not just physical, it was ideological, psychological, and cultural. In the new world of globalization, war no longer had to be fought solely on battlefields. It could be waged through the mind. This powerful, often unseen weapon of manipulation is being wielded to full effect in the ongoing war in Ukraine. In the early days of the invasion, Russian officials crafted a carefully controlled narrative. Russia's state-controlled media and digital platforms were flooded with false claims. One of the most prominent was the justification for the invasion itself, the supposed need to denazify Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin repeatedly referred to the Ukrainian government as being run by neo-Nazis, a distortion of the country's democratic institutions. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky, who is of Jewish descent, became the target of these accusations, which ignored the fact that he was elected democratically and had no ties to any far-right extremist groups. Yet Russian state media pushed this narrative with relentless fervor, attempting to justify the invasion to both Russian citizens and international audiences. A chilling example of Russia's fabrications occurred after the discovery of mass graves and evidence of atrocities in the Ukrainian town of Bucha. Satellite images and eyewitness accounts revealed the horrifying scale of the killings, where Ukrainian civilians had been executed by Russian soldiers. The images, broadcast worldwide, sparked outrage and condemnation. Yet Russia immediately launched a counter-offensive in the information war, calling the scene in Bucha a staged attack, orchestrated by the Ukrainian government and Western intelligence agencies. Russian officials and media outlets pushed the narrative that the bodies were planted and that no atrocities had taken place. In an attempt to confuse the truth, they claimed that the bodies shown in Bucha were actors and that the footage was manipulated to serve a political agenda. The Russian propaganda apparatus and sympathetic channels flooded social media with these surreal claims, some even speculating that Western forces had orchestrated the massacre to frame Russia. This campaign, designed to undermine the truth and sow doubt about authenticity of the evidence, played a significant role in dividing global opinion, with some people in other countries beginning to question the veracity of the information. As the war progressed, Russia's disinformation efforts took on numerous forms, from spreading false flag operations to creating viral fake news. One of the most prominent tactics was spreading misleading or fabricated videos. These often featured dramatic but false accounts of Ukrainian atrocities designed to inflame Russian nationalism and justify ongoing military operations. For instance, Russian-controlled media outlets repeatedly pushed the claim that Ukrainian forces were using civilians as human shields. These reports were not just baseless, but often took real images out of context or doctored them to fit a predetermined narrative. Another viral piece of disinformation involved claims of Ukrainian biolabs funded by the US. Russian officials, including the Ministry of Defense, claimed that Ukraine was developing biological weapons with Western assistance. Despite a lack of any credible evidence, the story circulated widely across social media, especially in the early days of the war.
Russia asked the Security Council for today's meeting for the sole purpose of lying and spreading disinformation, and that is exactly what you have heard from the Russian PR this morning.
One of the more bizarre fabrications was that Ukraine was involved in the illegal trafficking of children, including the accusation that the country was operating baby factories to harvest and sell babies. In this absurd digital war of disinformation, Russian-backed accounts and bots infiltrated social media, spreading false information and fake stories designed to divide Ukrainian society and question the legitimacy of the government. They seeded rumors of corruption within Ukraine's political leadership, distorted public perceptions of the military progress of the Ukrainian army, and even targeted Western leaders with negative portrayals to undermine international support for Ukraine. A prominent example of this digital campaign was the creation of fake social media profiles that masqueraded as ordinary Ukrainians.
Did you create fake accounts? Yes, he says. Bespalov worked inside Russia's Internet Research Agency for 3 months.
These fake accounts spread fabricated stories about the war, making it seem as though ordinary citizens were questioning their government or Ukraine's right to self-defense. One of the most insidious effects of Russia's disinformation campaign was the manipulation of information outside of its own borders. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Europe were targeted with efforts aimed at casting doubt on the West's support for Ukraine, and that a proxy war was being waged against Russia, when in reality, the support is aimed at the legitimate defense of Ukraine's territorial integrity and international law. However, in many countries, these narratives resonated with local frustrations over economic hardship and distrust of Western powers. In some parts of the global south, Russian propaganda found fertile ground. Some nations questioned whether the war was truly about Ukrainian sovereignty or just another manifestation of Western imperialism. These questions were seeded by Russian-controlled channels that framed the invasion as a fight against Western domination rather than an unjustified act of aggression. Russia's primary goal in its information warfare is not to convert the West to Russian ideals, but to divide it. The Kremlin's long-term strategy is to erode the trust that Western citizens have in their governments, their institutions, and even each other. By creating divisions in society, whether they be political, racial, or social, Russia ensures that Western countries are preoccupied with their internal struggles rather than focusing on Russian actions in Ukraine. Despite the often ridiculous nature of the Russian propaganda apparatus, its disinformation campaign remains a formidable weapon in Putin's arsenal. In the end, while Putin's 3-day operation to rid Ukraine of Nazis, biolabs, and democracy continues, the true strength lies in the ability of ordinary people to discern fact from Russian fiction. As Vladimir Lenin once said, "The best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves," a tactic that is central to Russia's propaganda and control strategies today.